This is Stephen Byer from Unearthed Films.
This is Eric Stanzi.
This is Fred Vogel.
This is Grandamit Stake.
This is Scott Philip Gergens, director of 29 Needles, and you are experiencing Sadistic Cinema.
Sadistic Cinema.
Sadistic Cinema!
This is Sadistic Cinema.
Welcome, everybody, to the sickest, darkest side of the internet. This is Sadistic Cinema. And as always, I am your host, David Gibson. And here with me is my partner in crime, Stephen Nemeth. Stephen, how you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful, man. And again, really excited for today's show and today's guest.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one because, we usually have just filmmakers, and we have a film historian on with us.
Yeah, and, a lot of the filmmakers that we talk with are very knowledgeable in film, but I've been talking to this gentleman for years, and an incredible, eclectic, and detailed mind for cinema and cinema facts and everything that he has. Our guest is the author of The Haunted World of Mario Bava, the Tomes of Terror, 3 volumes of those about more classic horror films from the 40s, Splintered Visions of Lucio, the Splintered Visions, the films of Lucio Fulci, Real Depravities, the films of Klaus Kinski, Human Beasts, the films of Paul Naschy, the upcoming Assault on the System, the Nonconformist Cinema of John Carpenter, and also the upcoming The UNSANE Cinema of Dario Argento.
Don't forget the So Deadly, So Diverse.
Did I skip that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. And So Deadly, So Perverse, 3-volume set about giallos and some giallo adjacent stuff. Our guest is author Troy Howarth. How are you today, Troy?
Oh, I'm very good, and after an introduction like that, I can't help but disappoint.
Thanks for coming on with us, Troy.
I don't believe you.
Well, thank you for having me regardless, and hopefully people will find it enjoyable. I certainly, the term film historian always makes me very nervous. It always sounds very pompous. It's not something I'm comfortable with. I'm just a fan.
The quality of your knowledge, I think speaks for itself. I wouldn't call someone a film historian who I don't think so. And, I'm not saying that because that's on your intro card that you gave us or anything. It's just over the years, through our conversations and, and of course now through your audio commentaries and your writing, I don't think there's anything else that more accurately describes you. Yeah, yes, you are a fan, but I think
you have to be a fan to be a historian.
I think that's what makes your film history knowledge so engaging is your excitement you have as a fan. And
quibbling about it to one side is, it's just one of those labels that I've always, I don't know, it just doesn't seem quite right for me. But if people wish to call me that, I've been called worse. I can handle that. But yes, I think one of the things that is lacking with some people when they're talking about film is a sense of enthusiasm, and I do try to bring that to anything that I do. It shouldn't just be, sort of dry and stuffy.
I think the first of your commentaries, my wife knows you of you vicariously through me, and she's seen some of our conversations that have happened over the years. But watching the commentary on the Synapse Suspiria is something that she really enjoyed. She doesn't usually watch commentaries. She usually kind of tunes out, if I watch a movie and then, pop it back in for a commentary or go to select parts, to, focus on, whatever's going on if it is scene-specific commentary. And she really enjoyed yours. So to somebody who isn't as film nerdy, and she is very knowledgeable, but there's certain aspects of it she doesn't nerd out like I do on. But she really enjoyed your commentary on that. And
well, I just want to say, usually when I buy a movie, and I see a film historian on a commentary track, it used to be I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. I wish they could get somebody a part of the film.
Yeah.
But I with your commentaries, I think you're able to put so much knowledge into. I think you're very efficient with your words, and it makes it a lot more knowledgeable and enjoyable to watch your commentaries.
Yeah, I've had this discussion with some people online, well, largely online, because people in the real world that I know don't really care about this sort of stuff. But there is this mentality. I've seen it, and annoy me sometimes when people say, why do I want to listen to somebody who didn't have anything to do with the movie? My response to that is, if you tried listening to commentaries by any number of different people involved in making films, especially when you're dealing with films that are 30, 40 years old, they don't remember anything.
Yeah.
Their comments could be just as easily and efficiently put into a 15-minute interview as opposed to an hour and a half to 2-hour commentary track where they go silent or they wander off talking about things that have nothing to do with anything. But also, you get the ones, especially now that commentaries are so much a dime a dozen. They used to be kind of rare. It was kind of, really for special editions, and now everything seems to get one. Especially new movies, they're kind of PR puff pieces. So you might get people that were responsible for making the films, but it's very much kind of a mutual admiration society type of thing, and everybody's wonderful and everything else. And that's not really what they think, and they're probably sitting there thinking, oh, this guy is, I can't stand this person or whatever, but they're putting on a show. So I think that the argument that commentary really is only of value if it's by people connected with the film has been pretty well punctured down through the years. Not necessarily by myself, but by many people who do tracks such as this.
I've bought films that are not on my top priority because they've been a little more limited, and because you're doing the commentary on them. I've moved it up on my list just to get, because the quality of your commentaries is just so entertaining and informative, and I figured that if you were involved in this, I probably need to reevaluate this film, and also I don't know, it's just been so exciting. I really enjoy your commentaries, man, and I don't mean to be too praising about it, but it's they really give a lot of value to the editions I have. The zombie commentary, the Fulci, it is not Fulci zombie. I mean Argento Suspiria commentary are two of my favorites, but. I still have a lot of your stuff in shrink wrap in my to-watch pile that I haven't got to yet, because there's films I've watched many times over the years, and I just haven't got to those editions, especially with a toddler in the house. There's some of those films with that content that, I can't watch them.
Well, they have to learn sometime.
They will, and I've got Zombie right there on the shelf for them.
True.
What are some of your favorite commentaries before you got into the game, back when they were rare?
Well, you're going back to really, I'd say around 1993. In 1992, Bram Stoker's Dracula came out, and although it's a movie that I'm not particularly nuts about now, back in 1992, I thought it was just about the greatest thing ever. And it was very important in terms of getting me to start thinking outside the box in terms of what I would watch, because up until then I tended to be very horror focused, whereas watching Dracula and seeing all the behind the scenes stuff with Coppola, I thought, wow, I want to see this guy's other movies. So that's what made me go out and watch movies like The Godfather and Apocalypse Now and Conversation, much better films than Bram Stoker's Dracula. And from there, kind of going out and Scorsese and various other people as well. So the first time I became aware of the concept with commentary was when Dracula was released by Criterion on Laserdisc. I laugh when people complain about the prices of Blu-rays. When I think back to the days of a Laserdisc through Criterion, a special edition like that was like $130.
Yeah, Spartacus on Criterion.
Yeah.
Pulp Fiction Criterion. Yeah, they were pretty pricey.
Yeah, they could be.
I didn't know about the Dracula Criterion. I do have Dracula on Laserdisc as the regular release, but I never saw it on Criterion.
Yeah, it was a 3-disc. It was in the I guess it was CAV format that you could freeze frame everything.
I was just about to ask that. Yeah.
And so that had Coppola commentary, and which has since been reissued on the Blu-ray, so you can listen to that track. But then from there, I just the idea at first of people talking over a movie just seemed strange to me, because it's very contrary to what I would. I'm the type of person, if I sit and watch a movie with somebody, I want them to be quiet. So I didn't understand it at first, but then I came to understand what it could be, and I guess really started listening to particularly the John Carpenter commentaries when he started doing for his movies like Escape from New York and Halloween and Assault on Precinct 13. But in terms of, and also other filmmakers, I mentioned Coppola. I've always enjoyed his commentaries. Even when I don't enjoy his films, I enjoy listening to him because I think he's a very interesting man to listen to. Carpenter's always very interesting to listen to. George Romero was always great. David Cronenberg. Werner Herzog, of course, is the man. That's a voice that you don't tire listening to.
I just want him to narrate every documentary ever.
I want him to narrate my life in great detail, and I would be a very happy man. But it's just a shame that people like, Klaus Kinski didn't live long enough to do, or Mario Bava, or various other people. But as far as the kind of film,
Kinski commentary, that would be
well, that would be something.
Yeah,
it would be very litigious, I'm sure. It would be very interesting. But as far as kind of critical commentaries go, yes, listening to various tracks down through the years kind of taught me what I wanted to do, and also taught me what I didn't want to do. And I won't mention the people I don't like for obvious reasons, but I can say that, for example, listening to Christopher Frayling talking about Sergio Leone's movies was wonderful. Jonathan Rigby's various commentaries, especially on Hammer films and films of that vintage, he's terrific to listen to. Greg Mank on some of the old Universal horror films. David Callett, who tends to specialize more in sort of silent cinema, but he's also done things like Godzilla and whatnot.
Now he wrote a book on Godzilla, didn't he?
Yes,
did. He also he did the commentary on the early Mabuse films.
Yeah, he wrote a book about the Mabuse films too.
The Strange Case of Dr. Mabuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't gotten that, and I don't know why, because I'm a Mabuse fanatic.
Well, you should.
But that was those were commentaries I used to enjoy very much, and I would watch over and over. Fritz Lang films are, there's so much technique in them, and then of course with Mabuse, there's all these psychological layers and layers of the production and things going on. So those were extremely interesting to me. When I asked you that question, John Carpenter, Frayling, and David Callett were the three that probably were some of my favorites back in the day.
Yeah, I would say Carpenter was my entry into really enjoying commentaries as well.
Speaking about Carpenter, and maybe even we'll talk about the Thing commentary.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed what seems to be reported edits in the various reissues of the commentary on different releases?
You mean on the Thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't until it was pointed out to me. I did remember at one point. I remembered there was something I remember hearing in one of the tracks that I thought was funny, and then it wasn't there, and I thought, well, maybe I just misremembered it, or maybe it was on a different one. And I bet you it was one of the things that was cut, because apparently Kurt Russell as well told maybe a story that about Keith David stealing a car or something like that. That Universal decided, which they do. The major studios, when you do anything involving the major studios, sometimes they can get very heavy-handed with their edits. And now I don't know that it's ever happened to me for the simple reason I don't listen to my tracks, or at least I very, very rarely listen to them once they're out there. But I know it's happened to people where it'll go silent for a long time, which really infuriates me when that happens. But sometimes it's not just because they're not talking. Sometimes it's because the studio has decided, no, we can't have that, and they cut things out.
Well, it seems with the Carpenter or Kurt Russell commentary, there was some content that the studio objected to.
Mm-hmm.
Then when it created gaps, when it went to a second reissue, they retimed it.
Mm-hmm.
To close the gaps or to make them shorter in places, and then reordered the commentary too. So things that seemed specific before were off.
Yeah.
And then I need to go back and listen to them, but somebody said that there are, I believe this was an article I read about it, that they use alternate takes,
Mm-hmm.
which seemed odd to me too. Like,
yeah, I had heard that. I'd also heard, that one of the worst commentaries I've ever heard, and I'll say it only because it's not by a peer, it's by a filmmaker. It's actually by a filmmaker that I love, but William Friedkin's commentary on the 2000 version of The Exorcist, which is pretty much just him narrating everything that you can see. I was told by somebody in the know that he recorded a much better track for that film that for whatever reason he decided against using, and he went back and did that version that we have now. So if that version still exists somewhere, I'd love to hear it sometime, because the one that exists now is terrible.
So I have all those releases of The Exorcist from then, and that was the one on the version you've never seen?
Yes.
Okay. And that was, and I believe in that commentary, he was still referring to the theatrical cut as his preferred director's cut.
Yes, which he's since changed his mind on, but yeah.
Yeah. And I prefer the theatrical cut, and I wrote two articles for a magazine about The Exorcist as a tribute to The Exorcist, and one of them is called, one of my articles is called The Two Exorcists, and it's about both of those cuts, and it's got the history of the nomenclature change and some of the other weirdness involved in how they marketed it, and what's going on between those two cuts, why I prefer one, and why Friedkin, his reasons he stated he preferred one back in the day. So I guess you won't know if that ever happens to you with the editing or the stuff that we were talking about.
Well, I mean, I get my comp copies, so they're all sitting there on the shelf, and I'm very proud of them. But to pull them down off the shelf and listen to myself, I've done it a couple of times. I haven't done it on many. I do tell myself every now and again, you really should listen to them at some point. But I don't know. Maybe at some point I'll discover, because I know there was a few that I did that were MGM titles. Like Quiet Place in the Country and The Manitou and Grave of the Vampire and a few others. And MGM is notorious for doing things like that. So that's possible. I would say to anybody who listens to me, if I tend to go silent in a commentary track, there's probably been some editing, because I make a point of not going quiet.
Oh, yeah, it's jam-packed with information. You've got an incredible rhythm and pace going on at once.
Now, Troy, what commentary that you've done that you were most hyped up about, that you were most proud to be able to do?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's several that come to mind. I was incredibly excited to do Don't Torture a Duckling, which I think is Lucio Fulci's greatest film. I was obviously very happy to do Suspiria because it's such a popular film. It's not my favorite Argento film, but it's a very popular film.
What is your favorite Argento film?
Deep Red.
Awesome.
Deep Red. I was also really, really super, super, super hyped to do the two Polanski films that I did, Bitter Moon and The Tenant. So those were big ones. And also even a couple of films that were big favorites from childhood, like The House of Drip Blood and Dracula, Prince of Darkness. I was very excited to do those as well.
I need to get Dracula, Prince of Darkness. That is
yes, you do.
One of my favorites. I only have the Anchor Bay VHS of that.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, I need a better copy of that one.
Yeah, this one looks a little better.
I loved it when Anchor Bay was doing those, and then when they were doing the other ones like Scars of Dracula, I didn't get Prince of Darkness when it came out on DVD because I already had it on VHS, and DVD was such a new format at the time. And I just, I didn't have all that money to spend, so I was buying titles I didn't have yet. And then I really enjoyed getting Scars of Dracula because I had that second disc with Christopher Lee's music video.
Oh yeah, the Many Faces of Christopher Lee and the music videos. Yeah.
Yeah. What was oh God, it was an Elvis song, wasn't it?
I don't remember. I kind of blocked that out of my mind. He's my favorite actor. I love him to death, and he was my childhood hero. But maybe some of those music videos weren't the best idea.
Yeah, it was, and he had this country guy, this
Yes.
kind of like rock and roll country guy that he did. God, why am I like I know Elvis pretty well, and I can't remember what song this is. But it was a mashup between that and Ave Maria.
Yes.
And he went into Ave Maria at the end. Now, have you heard Christopher Lee's Italian progressive metal stuff?
I have heard some of the stuff he did, the metal music, and I think by the time he got around to doing some of those things, he was already well into his 80s, and maybe his voice wasn't as strong as it once would have been. So, I mean, look, he always wanted to be a singer. He always said that he wished he would have been an opera singer instead of an actor, and it was something that he kind of regretted. So, God bless him for going out and doing it at the end, but not my favorite stuff to listen to.
I felt that it was a little better than the Elvis song of the Ave Maria mashup.
Well, yes.
But yeah, I wish he was younger when he did it. One of them was a theme album about Charlemagne, which he's a descendant of. So that was exciting to experience. But yeah, there's some of it was a little awkward, but a lot of it was still pretty cool, coming from somebody who is a progressive power metal old school lover. So, David, I'm sorry. I think I cut you off before?
No, you're fine. I was going to ask Troy. Since you've dedicated so many words to it, what was your gateway into Italian horror?
Well, it started when I was very, very young. Well before, honestly, I was probably 6 years old, so I probably didn't even understand the idea of Italy as a country. I was just a little kid, and my mom used to record horror movies off of late TV that I would sometimes watch, and one of them that I watched was Baron Blood, the Mario Bava film, which is not one of his better films, but it's a movie I have a lot of affection for, and it just made a big impression on me. And then years later, when I got the Encyclopedia of Horror Films, which was a huge influence on me and me wanting to write about movies, flipping through the book, and of course it being a very scholarly book, it referred to these foreign films by their original titles. So I'm looking through the book and I see this picture of Elke Summer in a miniskirt screaming in a torture chamber. Well, I recognize the image, but the title at the bottom, Gli Orrori del Castello di Norimberga, I didn't know what that was. Realized, it's Baron Blood. And reading the review, it was like, this guy who made this film is kind of a big deal, evidently, and this isn't even one of his better films. So that intrigued me. It made me want to look into discovering more of his films. Growing up in the 80s, late night TV and things like that, they used to run a lot of European films, and I didn't understand what they were or what the greater context of what that all was, but I saw things like The Black Cat, the Lucio Fulci film, The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave, Lady Frankenstein, Night of the Howling Beast, Horror of the Zombies, all kinds of European things that played on TV, and just kind of gradually kind of became indoctrinated that way. But I didn't really start to really understand who some of these people were, or the bigger context of European horror films and European cinema in general until years later.
And I have a question, because this has come up in our group before, and we have some buddies online who argue over this. Opera, is that a giallo or a slasher, in your opinion?
Well, opera's a giallo, definitely.
Okay.
Now the one
I said it was a giallo as well. I think it's it's a combination of both. It definitely can go in both genres.
I think the one that's a little bit more muddied around the same time that's very similar to it is Stage Fright. That's one I can understand more easily calling a slasher, although I also class it as a giallo, but it's definitely also a slasher.
So all these Stage Fright?
Yeah, so also known as Bloody Bird and Aquarius and various other titles.
Now, that was his debut, wasn't it?
That was his first film as a director, yes.
Awesome.
But see, the term giallo, it's so broad, and it seems it's so hard to pinpoint. Because me and Steven were talking about All the Colors of the Dark. Mm-hmm. If that wasn't Italian, that would just be a cult film to me. I would never call that a giallo in 100 years. But everybody calls it giallo, so I guess I gotta call it a giallo. But it just doesn't have the same feel to me as most giallos. What do you define a giallo as personally?
It's a tough thing to define, and it's very slippery. And even when you talk about the term horror, it's also very slippery because there are certain movies that people would argue whether they're horror films or not. Yeah. Gialli are basically, they're Italian thrillers, but they're not just. There are a lot of Italian films that are thrillers that aren't what we would consider to be gialli, and the gialli tend to be very stylized. Not always murder mysteries in the sense of the killer with black gloves. There's all kinds of different forms of gialli. There's also the what I call the sexy gialli, which are typically about kind of amoral people ganging up on a psychologically fragile protagonist and trying to drive them insane. Based on Les Diaboliques, the French film of the 50s. That's what a lot of those films are based on. But they're gialli as well. But they're usually, they're thrillers that are very stylish, and also they tend to have either a very strong psychological, psychosexual, or fetishistic or violent kind of bent to them. Is basically, it's not a simple one-sentence description. I can't put it that way, but basically that.
Do you consider Fulci's One on Top of the Other, is that gialli?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I didn't know I owned that because I have it as a perversion story.
Yes.
I've been looking for it for years, and I didn't realize that when I picked up the Mondo Macabro version, that was One on Top of the Other, because it's been one. Because I know there's a much larger Fulci filmography before that, with a lot of, I guess, some westerns and some comedies and dramas. But getting into things that are more related to horror, I felt that was one of the earlier ones that did that. But I could never put my hands on it, and I guess I finally did. But I had it for a couple of weeks before I realized what it was.
Yeah, I think there was some confusion online. It might even have been on the movie database, which is a nice resource, but it's something you can't rely on it for much in the way of information because there's a lot of mistakes there. But I think for a while there was some confusion where they were calling Beatrice Cenci perversion story, and that's not the case. They're very different films.
I did see that.
Yeah.
I think that confused me a bit too.
Yeah, the one I think the film where me and Steven probably butt heads the most is Suspiria, because he feels that falls more in giallo than I do.
Oh, it's not a giallo.
I didn't.
No, it's not. No. I will not argue this point. It's not. I actually spent a lot of time on the commentary talking about that.
Steven, I think Steven was just being contrarian.
No, I said
during our discussion.
I can argue that it's a giallo.
It has giallo elements.
Giallo to me.
It does have the kind of riddle, and it does have the black gloves, and because it's Argento. But you could say the same thing about Inferno as well. But no, I don't. I wouldn't say that. But some people do. Some people are very insistent that it is.
What did you think about the Suspiria remake?
It was about an hour too long. There was about 3 times too much Tilda Swinton than there needed to be. It got very self-indulgent, but it was an interesting movie. I wouldn't dismiss it. It was certainly very well made, and the director's obviously a talented director. And you know what? I give him credit for doing something different and for making a very different movie. I never really understood the obsession with remaking Suspiria, because Suspiria is not such a great story. It's not really a great script. It's a great audio-visual experience in terms of the colors and the music. So if you're going to say, well, we're going to redo it, but we want to go in the opposite direction with the color, I respect that, but at the same time, it's like, but why? So you take that away, and there's really not that much. But I give him credit for doing something different with it.
Seeing the various things Tilda Swinton did in that movie, especially one of I picked out that one of those roles was her, and I'm not going to go too deep into that, but in case there's people who haven't seen the movie yet. But I felt that once I realized, I said, "There's something up with that character," and I said,
"Well, that's not really a spoiler, Stephen."
I think that they should remake Remo Williams. I think Tilda Swinton should play Chung.
Joel Grey.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, me and Stephen were talking today. Besides Suspiria, it seems like the remake craze has really stayed away from Italian cinema, which I find kind of strange. People aren't trying to redo Fulci, though we know of somebody who might be doing that, but it's really stayed away from the giallo and the Italian horror.
Well, you have to bear in mind that most anything that comes out of Hollywood is geared towards the major marketplace, and in mainstream marketplace in America, they don't have a clue about these people or these films. So I think they're safe on that level. They'd be more inclined, I think, to remake Sergio Leone movies. I'm surprised they haven't redone The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, for example. Maybe they will. I heard as far as Argento or Fulci, I don't think that will happen too much.
I heard talk of them doing that.
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, that or Fistful.
I mean, hey, Fistful of Dollars was a
rip-off
of Yojimbo, and Kurosawa got a payout out of that as a result. Although, as Leone correctly pointed out, Kurosawa in turn was also ripping off an Italian playwright. I can't remember the person's name, but there was an Italian play called The Servant of Two Masters. So, nothing's born in a vacuum, but. They did a remake of The Magnificent Seven a few years ago, and that was also a remake of a Kurosawa, of course. So I wouldn't be shocked if they do it. I'm not terribly opposed to remakes.
Ransom with Mel Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
That was a remake of High and Low, Kurosawa.
Yeah, That's true.
Forgotten about that.
Yeah, so
I don't think I've seen that one.
Yeah, that was a Ron Howard.
Ron
Howard redoes Akira Kurosawa
with Gary Sinise and Mel Gibson.
Yeah, work it out for yourself.
I think they let them do that on camera.
Now, it seems to me like Fulci is starting to gain more steam with horror fans. I mean, he's always been a name. What is you said Duckling is your favorite Fulci film. What is your favorite non-giallo Fulci film?
My favorite Fulci horror film, we'll put it that way, would be City of the Living Dead, also known as Gates of Hell.
Which your commentary is amazing on that one.
Well, thank you. I haven't listened to it yet, so I'll have to take your word for it. But I was glad to do it. I love that one. Don't
listen to it. Thompson talks over you constantly.
Oh well, I'm not surprised.
I'm just kidding.
I suppose my favorite non-Fulci or Fulci non-giallo, non-horror would be For the Apocalypse, which is a western. So he worked in a ton of westerns or ton of genres. Sorry.
Has that had a Blu-ray release?
Only in Germany, and okay. I'm hoping that they're going to do it in America at some point. If they do, I'd obviously love to do it. But
that was hard for me to find on DVD back in the day.
Wanker Bay put it out.
But for some reason, when it came out, I was managing a record store, and they had a big video section, and we didn't get that one. I had to go through some hoops to special order it for some reason. It was really weird.
No, it's a wonderful film.
Now, Argento would be the third book of Italian filmmakers that you've written, totally dedicated to them. Is that the order of your appreciation with Bava, Fulci, and Argento? Was there a specific reason you went in that order, or is it just what you were more interested in?
In a funny way, I guess it's true. I guess, Bava is king as far as I'm concerned. He's the greatest of them all. He's my favorite director of all. Preferring Fulci over Argento is not exactly common, but I really like the fire and intensity and just the kind of burning anger that's in Fulci's movies, whereas Argento's movies are a little bit cooler and more aesthetic. But I love all three of them dearly, and obviously if I had to pick a favorite of favorite film out of all three of those guys, it's my absolute favorite, would be Deep Red. So, I mean, funnily enough, that's my favorite that any of those guys did, but I do have a slight preference for Fulci over Argento, but Bava is ultimately my big favorite. Bava, I did, my original version of the book was written really when I was in college, and it came out in 2002, and then it was redone in 2013. So, and I still don't feel like I got it quite right, but I don't want to go back anytime soon and fix it up again either. That's unfair to the public.
What
Now,
is your... Go ahead. No,
I was going to ask if you kept with the theme of focusing on Italian horror directors, and you wrote another book, who would be the fourth subject?
I've thought about different people at different points. There were a couple people that I had thought about doing, and I was reluctant to do it because they were alive and I knew they were crazy. Lenzi was one of them that I had thought about doing something about Lenzi, but I had been warned by people who again were in the know that previous attempts had not gone well, as far as involving him was concerned. So he is unfortunately no longer with us now. So maybe at some point he would be somebody I would consider. Suave is an interesting case, but Suave's he had this wonderful run of movies, but then unfortunately he stepped away from movies for a long time to deal with personal issues, and when he came back, now he's making these little things for television that nobody's getting to see over here. So yeah, that would be a tough one to do. Lenzi's a definite possibility, in terms of people who haven't gotten any kind of in-depth coverage like that. Although I think he's well beneath the level of those other three guys, I do think that could be an interesting, if not for me, for somebody to do a project like that.
How do Martino and because who else was I just about to mention?
Deodato?
Yes, Deodato and D'Amato. Which, and I understand. I mean, I'm totally into Bob, and I think he's a master. I'm not saying anybody is equal or above him on certain aspects, but Sergio Martinez, he's been all over the place.
Yeah,
he's probably made my favorite giallo, which is Torso. So I have an affinity for him.
Yeah, Bava and Argento was the only one of those guys who really had a career kind of like a Sergio Leone, who really kind of reached that level of success and recognition where he could really nurture projects from inception and always write his own material. It was only later that he kind of became a little bit of a gun for hire and started doing some things he probably shouldn't have been doing. But all the other guys basically were working directors. Not to say that in a disparaging way, it's just a reality that was how they worked. But they all kind of managed to put their stamp on their projects. So Martino, yeah, much like the others, very, very much a journeyman who did he did comedies, he did erotic films, he did giallo, he did horror, he did action and westerns, and just about everything.
From where I'm sitting, I can see like some titles on my shelf, like Torso, Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key, and American Rickshaw, and Hands of Fate. The Hands of Steel.
Hands of Steel, yeah.
Hands of Steel. And I'm just like, those are kind of all over the place with, the types of movies they are. Did he do After the Fall of New York? Mm-hmm. Yes.
He did a trilogy of those post-apocalyptic things in the mid '80s.
Are you a fan of the Italian cannibal genre?
Yeah, with some reservations. I'm an animal lover, so I struggle a little bit with some of the scenes, but I think Cannibal Holocaust is a great film. I think that it's always going to remain a contentious movie because of the material that's in it. But I mean, they've made it available without them. It's, you know, you can watch it on disc with those scenes edited out, but what's the point? I mean, they were done anyway, so, you know, might as well just suck it up and watch it, I guess. But I struggle with some of that type of material. Actually, the scene that upset me the most, actually, because I thought it was the most cynical and the most pointless, was actually in a Martino film called The Mountain of the Cannibal God, with Ursula Andress and Stacy Keach. Scene where this monkey is killed. And Anchor Bay, when they put that movie out on DVD back in the, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s, they had an interview with Martino where he was insisting, oh, no, we just happened to catch that on film. And they made a liar of him because they stepped through it frame by frame, and you could see that monkey was being catapulted into the clutches of this, I don't know, anaconda or whatever it was. Terrible, pointless scene that didn't need to be there. It's just there for a little bit of color, and it really, frankly, pissed me off, that sequence, because it's not necessary in a movie like that, which is more kind of a B movie type action adventure. It didn't need a scene like that. So I think he subsequently did admit that, yeah, we did it and we shouldn't have done it, and, you know, I mean, it is what it is. You can't do anything about it now. But
Deodato's not even happy that he did that. You know, he's kind of went back on wishing he never did it.
They were different times, and, you know, the attitudes were very different. And you know, we've all heard the stories about Lenzi working with Giovanni Lombardo Radice on Cannibal Ferox, and Radice wanted to kill him because you know, he was trying to get him to do scenes, you know, where he would be mean to an animal or whatever, and he refused to do it. So yeah, I mean, that's a kind of a dark aspect of that subgenre. But some of the films I like a lot. I love Cannibal Holocaust. There was also some of the titles I get mixed up on. Jungle Holocaust, which was an earlier Deodato film, is very good. And the first one that Lenzi did, The Man from Deep River, or Deep River Cannibals, what we call it, that was good too. But I'm not particularly crazy about Cannibal Ferox, for example.
Okay, that's fair. And Steven, I cut you off on that. You had a question?
Go ahead, man. I just lost it. It was he triggered something else, and then I tried to find my original question, and I'm struggling going back to getting that one. Go ahead, David. Let me work on that.
Now, when you're writing a book, what is your writing process? So, how does it start out? Do you already have a subject in mind, or do you just find a lot of information like, I want to go with this, and how's the research process go?
I suppose I've been sort of storing away little bits of information here and there for many years now, whether it be just from collecting books on various different topics, or, you know, pulling information that I find online or in interviews, things like that, and I kind of keep some of that stuff, you know, just in case it would be needed at some point. I have it available. So I've got all kinds of things on various different topics, like dubbing, for example. I've always been interested in the dubbing side of things, trying to identify the people who provide the voices that we're familiar with on some of these films. So I try to give people shout outs when I do commentaries, because they're not credited and they deserve some credit. Usually I just sort of start to think, you know, what do I feel like devoting another 6 months to a year of my life on? I mean, I work fairly quickly, and I don't know if that's good or not, but it's good in the sense that I get things done fast. I don't think that I'm reckless about it, but I don't tend to struggle with writing in the way that some people do. It's fairly simple. Once I decide what I'm going to do, I just sit down and basically, as pedantic as it sounds, I just start to write. You know, if I decide, okay, I'm going to write about Klaus Kinski, you know, I think in my mind, I thought that was going to be a relatively simple, almost kind of a throwaway project, just something to do. And I didn't realize, even though I knew that he'd made a lot of films, although not quite as many as some people have maintained. It wasn't like he did, you know, 300 movies or whatever. Yeah. But it ended up being a tougher. It took a lot out of me, actually. I got quite sick at the end of that book. I think there might have been a connection, because you know, I came down with a really bad case of the flu. I was just super, super exhausted, and you know, you're not digging ditches, you're working in a coal mine, but it does take a lot out of you after a certain point when you're putting in, especially when you're like me and you insist on writing every day. And, you know, I don't want to lose that momentum. So every time I'm working on a book, every single day, I devote at least part of the day to that. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Have you seen Francesca by the Onetti brothers?
I have. I'm trying to remember what I thought of it. I haven't really been particularly nuts about a lot of the kind of giallo homage films or a lot of the Eurocode homage films. I think a lot of them tend to be a little bit on the pretentious side.
I really liked it because they hit the aesthetic.
Yes.
Like if
film stock wise, I guess.
Yeah,
they weren't using film stock, but
yeah, you could trick somebody into thinking that it was a much older film. As I enjoyed that In Fabric was definitely an homage to Argento, and that was the one I really enjoyed as well.
Yeah, the one that I saw, at first I was very disappointed. I didn't care for it at all, but I saw it again and really liked it, and I covered it in So Deadly, So Perverse, Volume 3, is Barbarian Sound Studio. I was very put off by that the first time I saw it, but I really liked it when I went back. But that's as much homage to Antonioni as anything else. So, but that's appropriate because Argento also was a big Antonioni fan, and of course Deep Red is very indebted to Blow Ups. So yeah, it all makes sense.
Now the John Carpenter book, that's one that you're finishing now?
It's done. It's in hopefully the layout stage. They're working on layouts for it now, and hopefully I'll be getting some files here soon to do some captioning, and then we'll be getting into compiling the index. The index is compiled, but as far as doing the page numbers and all the rest, that's a process.
Oh, they would be specific to the layout.
Yes.
I guess so. Yeah, you couldn't do that in advance.
Nope, unfortunately not. If there was a way, I'd do it, but no. So that's going to be a process. But yeah, it's all done, and the Argento is also done. It's just a question of getting into those final stages until they become real, tangible books.
Now, I remember what I was going to say earlier, and this is an aside, but when we were talking about the misfortune of animals and some of the Italian cinema and the cannibal films, I was thinking of early cinema or earlier moments in cinema that have touched on the same thing or have had claims about it. Mm-hmm. And are you familiar with Louis Buñuel's Land Without Bread?
Oh yeah, well I'm a big Buñuel fan, so I've seen not all of his films, but I've seen quite a few of them, including that. Yeah.
It just seemed like there was a lot of goats falling off that mountain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are even more mainstream examples. Apocalypse Now, the ending with the.
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal, and that's real. I mean, but now Coppola maintained that that was something that was going to happen regardless, so he just filmed it, and that's fine. But also you can look at some of Sam Peckinpah's movies, like I think it's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, where there's some sequences of chickens getting their heads blown off and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, it was accepted at one point, even in mainstream films. It's not now, which is a good thing, but, standards do change over time.
Now, with the John Carpenter book, is it going to be, it's a total retrospective of all of his films, or did you focus on a certain era or certain films?
I would never want to do a book that unless I were taking on something like Jess Franco, which is so huge and there's so much to cover, and just to differentiate myself from the pack, maybe I would do something like that. But no, other than that, the Carpenter book definitely focuses on the full sweep of his career, and that includes not just the movies he directed, but also movies that he wrote, movies that he produced, and movies that kind of got away from him, movies that he was planning to do that he didn't do for one reason or another, and so it covers everything.
I revisited the Indicator, Eyes of Laura Mars recently, yes. And I really enjoyed it. I like Tommy Lee Jones, so I think he's done some edgier things than people remember, like with Rolling Thunder and that. But yeah, I had forgotten that Carpenter wrote it, and that pulled me back to it and to really sit down with my wife and give it respect it in viewing. And I mean, I see that even with Irving Kershner directing, there's some very Carpenter things going on in there.
Well, it's very much an American giallo in many respects too, and that's another one that's covered in the third volume of So Deadly, So Perverse for that reason, because Carpenter was very influenced by those movies.
So how is Volume 3 of So Deadly, So Perverse? Is it the expanded world of the influence of the giallo, or how did you describe that when you first put it out? I think there was a cleaner way I said it when I was telling people about that volume.
Well, I should clarify to begin with. When I set out to write So Deadly, So Perverse, I didn't envision it being more than just a book. I didn't realize until I was approaching the films chronologically. I was writing it chronologically, and I reached a certain page count, and I was only on 1980 something or other. And I told the publisher, I said, "We got a problem here. It's going to be really, really big. So do I need to go back and cut it down a little bit, or do we split it into 2 volumes?" And he said, "No, we'll split it into 2 volumes." When the finished and the second one came out, people, of course, inevitably, some people complained, "Well, why didn't you include this movie, and why didn't you include that movie?" Well, I explained why, and if you read the preface, there's certain films that I don't think fit the criteria, but others will disagree, and that's fine. Write your own book if you want
Besides Suspiria, what is one that you got feedback?
Short Night of the Glass Dolls was a big one, okay. And a lot of people consider it a giallo. I understand why they do. I class it as a psychological horror film, which to me is slightly different. I have that in a release that calls it like part of a giallo collection. Yeah, Anchor Bay put it out as part of the giallo collection. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's another one called Perfume of the Lady in Black, which is very much like that too. But to me, movies like that are closer to something like Polanski's Repulsion than they are to a real giallo. So that's a judgment call. But the Volume 3 came about because there were all these films that are kind of in the giallo mold that aren't real. And that's an important thing that I make a big distinction on, that not everybody agrees with me on, although my Italian friends agree with me on this point, that a true giallo has to be an Italian film. It has to be predominantly an Italian film. A lot of these films were co-financed by different countries, but every film that's in the first 2 volumes of So Deadly, So Perverse is primarily an Italian film, directed by Italians, written by Italians, and so forth, even if they had Spanish money in them or German money or whatever. Volume 3 opens up the field to include movies from Spain, from Turkey, from India, from Asia, from various different places that, obviously they wouldn't be considered true gialli, but they're very much in that style.
So you've finally been able to provide a commentary for Vinegar Syndrome. And I say finally, I'm not sure if you were waiting for that chance to work with them, but I like Vinegar Syndrome a lot as a company that seems to love film, and no matter what it is, they really give it some awesome packaging and, make it feel special on the shelf. And which I think is needed if physical media needs excitement around it to survive in a retail market. So that's one thing I think they've been very important in doing, because they've created a lot of excitement about physical releases. And it's the Forgotten Gialli box set, correct? With
yes.
And you did Trauma.
Yes, not Dario Argento's Trauma.
Yes, of course.
But Leon Klimovsky's Trauma, which was a Spanish film from 1978, was actually Klimovsky's last film. Klimovsky is an Argentinian filmmaker who was very well known for his collaborations with Paul Nash. He did films like Werewolf Shadow and A Dragonfly for Each Corpse, and various other wonderful Paul Nash films of the 70s. But that's definitely a Spanish film in the giallo style.
Werewolf Shadow is one of my favorites, which that is the alternate title for Night of Walpurgis, right?
La Noche de Walpurgis, also known as Werewolf versus Vampire Women, and probably a million other titles. Yes, that's the one.
And which reminds me, when is Fury of the Wolfman coming out?
Your guess is as good as mine. Actually, I say that they finally put it up on the Ronin Flicks site as coming soon. So if past experience has taught me anything, that probably means next month.
I can't tell you. Actually, I have told you, and I've told you for years, so of how I didn't even know you were doing the commentary this time, but I kept on refreshing that page, waiting for Gates of Hell to show.
Oh yes.
For sale, because it seemed like I was under the impression it was going to be out in 2019, and then I believe Ronin Flicks or Scorpion said that it was going to be a January release in 2020, and then and then I guess when was it, in March they finally said, well, it's actually June.
Yeah, it got delayed obviously because they took their time to get the transfer right. So I'm glad that they did, because they finally got it to look right. Every other video version, including the Arrow version, and I mean no disrespect to Arrow, because they gave me my start doing commentaries, and they're a wonderful label, but even their most recent edition of Gates of Hell didn't look quite right. It still had kind of a waxy look to it, and it didn't have the detail it should. Finally, this version from Scorpion really gets it right, so it was worth the wait.
Yeah, I'm actually we did a whole episode reviewing that release, and I put it top tier with like the Suspiria restoration, Alien, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think it's a top tier restoration.
Yeah, they did a magnificent job, and it took a long time. I know that they spent a lot of hours and a lot of money trying to get it just right. So I don't seek out reviews of things that I work on for a variety of reasons. You're better off not looking sometimes. But I haven't seen anything online as far as people complaining, which is pretty rare. Usually it doesn't matter how good it is. There's usually somebody out there that wants to knock it for one reason or another. So as far as I know, it went over pretty well.
When that came out, that had a same release day as The Mechanic,
Yes.
and that was a really fun mail day to get both of those. One, I love both of the films, and I think both are beautiful transfers. They're great Scorpion releases with reversible covers and slip covers. And you did the commentary on Gates of Hell with it's Nathaniel Thompson, correct?
Yes.
It's Nathan. He goes by Nathaniel. I just want to make sure. And my friend and colleague Paul Talbot did the commentary on The Mechanic.
Well, Paul should do every single Charles Bronson movie ever made, as far as I'm concerned.
He really knows his stuff. When we were working together recently, we had to drive a few hours to a location together, and we talked about all kinds of cinema. He's very knowledgeable about everything, but yeah, he is very Bronson focused, and definitely knows that stuff too. And and the way that you have knowledge about the production and the other actors in it, and all these, you can trail off into all these different aspects about the film that come together. He does the same thing, and those are two good releases. So I definitely want to promote those as some of your recent releases that have come out, and that forgotten giallo set from Vinegar Syndrome too. I am going to be. I haven't seen the Fury of the Wolfman on the Coming Soon yet. I guess I stopped looking at Coming Soon because of Gates of Hell and The Mechanic moving into, their own dedicated screens, for ordering. Was it Johnny Cool and Death Warrant?
Yeah.
Were two others I was looking at there, but I didn't see that. I'm going to have to go back and check Ronin Flicks out, which is a great curated seller. Is that the way to describe them?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely they have their own platform that they work with, and then eventually they kind of put out more general release editions that Amazon and other places will carry, but they don't always include all the extras. So, for example, their release of Jungle Holocaust had a really good commentary track on it that is not included on the general release version, because they want to make it, they want to make that special edition deserving of that label, so they hold stuff back. I think they did the same thing when they put out conquest in a general release. They took Nathaniel and I's commentary off of it for the general release version.
That's another one I need. I believe I only have the Blue Underground DVD of that. I shouldn't have slept on that, but funds were tight when that one came out, and I didn't pick it up, but I need to.
Now Troy, how did you go from writing these books into doing commentaries? How did that come about?
It was kind of a weird situation. I had thought about doing them in the past. I always thought it would be interesting to do them. I didn't know that I'd ever have a chance to do them. I always assumed that if you were going to do one, you had to go to like a recording studio and all this stuff. And of course, that's not the case anymore. It's possible for them to be recorded from home in very good quality, and you never know any difference, versus a professional setting. So, I had approached one label with doing one because they kind of unexpectedly out of the blue were putting a giallo film out, and they didn't want to take a chance on me because I hadn't done one before. So they ended up declining my offer. But then right around the same time, Michael McKenzie, who at that time was freelancing for Arrow Video, and he has since become an official employee of theirs. He approached me about doing The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave, and the fitting kind of aspect of doing that particular movie was the fact that was actually the very first giallo I ever saw. Long before I knew what a giallo was, it was one of those movies that showed up at Channel 9 at 2 o'clock in the morning, cut to ribbons, and it didn't make any sense, but it was the first one I'd ever seen. So it made sense to do that one. And then it's like anything else. If you deliver and it goes over well and people are happy with it, then they ask you to do more. But at the time, I never would have guessed that I would go on to do so many.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Now getting back to Carpenter. What are your favorite films by John Carpenter?
Well, my top favorites are The Thing, Prince of Darkness, In the Mouth of Madness, Cigarette Burns, which is an episode of Masters of Horror that he did that I think is absolutely brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Halloween, of course, Assault on Precinct 13, Big Trouble in Little China. I mean, there are only a couple of John Carpenter films that I don't have much affection for. We'll put it that way. Well,
In the Mouth of Madness, I think, is so overlooked. And besides, Color Out, The Color Out in Space did H.P. Lovecraft very well. But before that, I think that was probably the best H.P. Lovecraft-inspired film ever made. And it's just brilliant, and it's so sad that people passed on that one.
A lot of his films, unfortunately, have been like that. The Thing was a big box office bomb when it came out in 1982, as many people know. It kind of derailed his career in many respects. He was going to do a big version of Firestarter for Universal, and that ended up getting canceled. And Firestarter was made, but not by John Carpenter, and it didn't turn out very well. It's always been one of those things of it's amazing how wrong people were about that movie when it came out. But a lot of his movies have been like that.
Big Trouble was the same way.
Big Trouble was a huge flop. Nobody got that film. The studio hated it. They didn't understand the idea of making Kurt Russell into an idiot and having his quote-unquote Asian sidekick being the real
celebrated now.
Yeah, they love it now. But at the time, it was hated. And it was also bad timing because Carpenter was also offered around the same time a movie called The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy. And he said, what are the odds of two sort of, Asian mysticism-themed kind of action comedy movies coming out at the same time in Hollywood when this had never happened before? And here, all of a sudden, there were two films, and Golden Child was the one that made money.
Wow.
What is the most interesting thing you learned about Carpenter when doing the research for the book?
I think the thing that really I came away from really, really understanding and really appreciating more about him was how hard he pushed himself for how many years. If you look at the man, it's not unkind to say he looks older than his years, and you might wonder why does he looks rough. And I think the reason for that is he pushed himself nonstop for many, many years. He was constantly jumping from one film to another. not just directing, but also writing and doing the music and so forth. And he told me that when he got to the music stage on Ghosts of Mars, that he looked at himself at one point and said, if I keep doing this, I'm going to kill myself. Not in the sense that he was going to blow his brains out, but in the sense that he was physically killing himself because he was just pushing himself too hard. So he, for years and years, he's been kind of playing the, I'm a tired old man routine and all that. But I get it now. I understand when I look at how nonstop that man worked for so many years, and how very consistent he was too. That even though there's this tendency a lot of people have to kind of say that after they live, he lost it. I don't agree with that at all. I think he did some excellent work after that. But he really, 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 really pushed himself really hard for a long time. And I think that was the thing that really impressed me whenever I did this was I knew he was reasonably prolific, but I didn't understand, too, there were a lot of other projects that he worked on and things that he was attached to that fell apart for one reason or another. So it was a constant workload that he had for a long time.
Yeah, he's just such a brilliant mind. It's sad to see. He should be a billionaire. He should. People go back and talk about The Thing like it's the greatest thing ever made, and it's in top 5 for me easily. And I think it's such a brilliant film. Absolutely. But everybody, nobody wanted to go see it in the theater.
No, I mean, financially, he's in very good shape because a lot of that has to do with the music, especially Halloween. Like, he owns that music, so he makes bank on that. He's in good shape on that level, but he took the failure of The Thing really, really badly because he really put himself into that really, really hardcore, and he was very proud of it, and justifiably so. But it wasn't just that the movie didn't do well at the box office. It was also torn to shreds by the critics and by the fans. The fans turned on him whenever he did that film because everybody just really, really disliked it. But it was a victim
what was the
of
big
time.
quote? What is it? The pornographer of violence or something like that? That really, really hurt him bad.
Yeah. He said that in America, usually horror is seen as like one step above porn, and people who make horror films aren't taken seriously. He said, in America, I'm a bum. In France, I'm an auteur. So, and he's right on that. There's definitely a snobby attitude over here. But it wasn't just entirely the failure of The Thing that kind of killed his deal with Universal. It was also Halloween 3, which he produced, because he steered that franchise in a very different direction and people didn't like it. I think for a period of time, he was really worried that his career was kind of, damaged beyond repair.
Yeah, I have a feeling that I'm not one of those people who I don't bash Halloween 3, but I was never a big fan of it. As a kid, I was pissed off because I was expecting to see Michael Myers. But I think it would have been a much better film if it was a standalone, if it didn't have that Halloween moniker with it. But I think now it's I was joking. I made a meme that all the hipsters are in the Halloween 3 now.
Oh, you're responsible for that, are you?
Yes. But
the irony is the film wouldn't have been made if it hadn't been for that. That's the thing. And that was I liked his idea of wanting to get away from. As he said, after the first movie, there's no story there. There's really nothing to do with that because you've already done it in the first film. So why not just have a franchise of movies built around Halloween with a separate standalone story every year? If Halloween 3 had gone over well, that would have been what would have happened. But, of course, after that, they just went back to pretty much Xeroxing the original one. I mean, after a certain point, obviously people enjoyed it and people, appreciated it. But I think that's one of the points I try to make in the book, too. I think it probably frustrated him to see how well those movies were doing, relative to their budgets anyway. Whereas a lot of the things that he was doing that were really inventive and different and not just repeating himself weren't going over well. He must have been a little bit bitter about that, I would think.
Halloween 3 is actually my favorite Tommy Lee Wallace movie.
Well, yeah, definitely. I I don't think he ever came quite close to recapturing the quality of that first one, which I think a lot of that had to do with Carpenter's influence as well.
I haven't seen Vampires Los Muertos yet.
Well, I had to review it for the book because Carpenter had a hand in it, at least nominally in terms of producing it. It's okay. I mean, Wallace unfortunately has very often found himself in a position of producing or rather directing movies that are sequels to other movies. And he did Fright Night 2, for example, which a lot of people don't like, but I kind of like it. And Halloween 3.
Oh, I forgot he did that.
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah, and with Vampires Los Muertos, I mean, Vampires Los Muertos right away, you're in trouble when you go from James Woods to, what's his name? John Bon Jovi. So it's a different thing.
Yeah, Bon Jovi. Wow. What did, Carpenter is next up for release, and the Unsane Cinema of Dario Argento is going to follow that?
It's hard to say at this point because they're through two different publishers and they're both more or less in the same stage, so it's hard to say. At this point, I guess it's a competition to see which one comes out first.
So how do you find a publisher, or did publishers find you?
Well, if I go all the way back to when I first started, I was in college and I took my, at this time, my idea of the Bava project was pretty much just maybe a monograph. I never thought that I'd write a book. And I took it to a college professor of mine, and he said, you can develop this into a book, which I thought was insane, but, he was right. And I said, well, how do I go about getting published? And he said, go home and find all the books you have on movies, look at the publishers, look at their addresses and things, and send them a chapter and say, I'm working on this, here's a sample, do you have any interest? I sent a sample of The Haunted World of Mario Bava to McFarland and to FAB Press in England, and they both wanted it, which was pretty amazing for me. I decided to go with FAB because they were the real lavish, company that I knew would really do visual justice to the book, because Bob is a very visual filmmaker. So when it came to later on, Midnight Marquee, actually, I had been getting their catalogs in the mail, and so I got a catalog the one day, and I thought, well, I'll send this guy an email and see if he was interested, and sure enough, he was. So they're doing the Argento book. The people that are doing the Carpenter book, WK Books, they're responsible for magazines like Wang's Chop and Monster, and I had done articles for them, and it all kind of came from that. So, different ways, I guess.
Well, that's awesome, man. Do you have anything that's on the horizon? Maybe a next subject for a book that you've been kicking around?
I have a contract for another company to do a book about Alice, Sweet Alice.
Okay.
Last year I interviewed the director, Alfred Sohl, who's a very nice man, and got a good in-depth interview with him, and he also gave us permission to reprint the script. So it'll be one of those books that'll be partly just the script of the book and also, some text, an interview with him, obviously, and kind of an in-depth analysis of the film and background on the people involved, which is going to be a little tricky in the sense that most of the people who worked on that film really didn't do anything else. It was just kind of a regional, movie that was shot in Paterson, New Jersey. So, that came about because I'm friends with Alfred Sohl's nephew. I think it's his nephew. Anyway, yeah, his nephew, Dante Tomaselli, who's a very talented independent filmmaker, who's done a number of horror films that are very influenced by people like Bava and Argento. So that's the next book. I'm thinking about a couple of other ideas, but I'm not really sure at this point what I'm going to do after that.
That Era release recently was really enjoyable of that.
Mm-hmm.
The what's the TV cut called?
Communion.
Yes. I was like, I couldn't remember. I'm actually halfway through watching Whitley Strieber's Philippe Moria's Communion right now, and I was like, somehow I got all messed up in the head thinking about it, and I said, what does this remind me of? What is this title also from? And that was it. It was the TV version of Alice, Sweet Alice.
I think that was actually Alfred Soul's preferred title, if I remember right. It was either that or Holy Terror. I think it was Communion was the title that he preferred. He doesn't particularly care for the Alice, Sweet Alice title.
Oh, but the print, I think it says Holy Terror on the title card on the TV version that's on the set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on that one it does say Holy Terror, but no, Communion. That was the title I was trying to think of. That was that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Alice, Sweet Alice is a pretty pretty good iconic title myself, but he doesn't much care for it.
No, I think it does too, but it's I don't, for some reason with Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte and it just kind of has that kind of ring to it, although it's something completely different. I don't know, maybe being an older guy and filmmaker, he the cadence of that reminds him of something else.
Could be.
But I like it. I think it sounds pretty classic, and it's a creepy and intriguing title that doesn't give anything away.
Oh yeah, well it's another one that's very much indebted to the giallo films, although Alfred Soul himself wasn't really consciously influenced by any of those films. He doesn't really seem to be overly familiar with those, although again Dante Tomaselli certainly is a huge fan, and he sees it too. But yeah, it was one of those films from the mid to late 70s that definitely seemed to have kind of a European quality to it.
And I don't know if it was something I read or if it was something that had an essay that had something to do with that release, but somebody was comparing it or saying that there were things from Don't Look Now
yeah,
that
definitely
affected it. And I actually watched them as a double feature back then, last year. When was that last year, like around August or October that came out? Is that when that was? Time is so weird for me right now, especially.
I think it was.
Yeah,
I think it was
fairly
around
recent.
then.
But God, it feels like forever ago now. But yeah, I watched those as a double feature, and I hadn't picked up the Criterion Don't Look Now, but I did. And then right after I picked it up, that Studio Canal edition came out, which I actually got for my birthday this year with the 10-disc Suspiria set.
Oh yes.
Do you have that one?
Me, no.
I like it's a beautiful set, and the posters in it I didn't realize were the German posters for it, and they're pretty big. They're a lot like there's that picture that advertises the set, and the posters are basically the same size as the box there, but they're actually much bigger and folded to put inside it.
Yeah.
But I guess they shrunk them down to put it in there. But I wanted to get the new one on 4K, and I guess at the time I didn't know there was a more modest 4K release of the 2018 Suspiria, so I got that. But that's a cool set. It has a lot of crazy stuff in it. And now I see there's that 12-disc Maniac double feature.
It's a lot of discs.
It sure is. You should be on there. You could fit a lot of commentary.
That's true. That's true. Well, I do like that movie a lot. And of course, that has an Italian connection too, as I'm sure you're aware.
And go ahead and say that for our viewers.
Well, obviously, Bill Lustig, who directed the film, and of course he's went on to found Blue Underground, and we have him to thank for a great many great video releases. He's a big fan of the Italian genre films, and he originally offered the female lead in that film to Dario Nicolodi, and she turned it down because she thought the script was pretty loathsome, so she passed. Caroline Munro ended up doing it, of course. But there's also some material in the film that Lustig worked on Dario Argento's Inferno when they were filming in New York for a week or two in 1979. And that included some helicopter shots that Argento decided not to use because he thought they were too shaky. And Lustig pretty much said, well, if you're not going to use them, do you mind if I do? And Argento said, sure. So they're in Maniac.
Nice. I thought I'd heard that before, but I'd forgotten. Yeah, Caroline Munro is awesome in the film, and I definitely loved her from back in the days, and in James Bond film, and also in the Sinbad movie.
Oh, sure.
She was always fun to watch on screen.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything? Actually, before I say that to you, another. You did the commentary on Lamberto Bava's Macabre, right?
Yes, that's right.
That's right. I just finally got that in. That was one thing where I did get the restocking email, and I was able to pick up. And I'm really glad, because I only have the old clamshell VHS of that that has.
Who put that one out?
88 Films in the
88,
UK.
yeah.
Yeah, they did a really nice job with that. They actually, the transfer on that is pretty much night and day. It looks much, much better. And fortunately, it also includes the Italian soundtrack with English subtitles, because that's one of the Italian films that suffered in English. Actually, a lot of Lamberto's films, for whatever reason, have suffered from really bad English dubbing, so a lot of them are better in Italian if you can watch them that way.
Awesome.
Well, I've been looking for that for years, and my old VHS is the clamshell with the refrigerator still on it, or the refrigerator. So I had to reverse the cover under the slip cover to the refrigerator scene. But so everybody, that's another current release that Troy has commentary on that I'm about to pop in and watch very soon here. I love that film. Is there anything that you want to ask here, David, before I ask Troy if there's stuff he wants to plug?
No, go right ahead.
Okay, Troy, is there anything, websites, publishers, or social media, or anything you want to plug?
No, not really. I mean, I'm on Facebook. Obviously, anybody who's interested is, able to search me that way. My name isn't a difficult one. There aren't 1,000. It's not like John Smith, so it's pretty easy to find me. I don't have a website or anything like that. Maybe I should, but I don't. As far as projects go, obviously we've got the 2 books coming out that we've been talking about. They should hopefully be out over the summer, both of them.
What are those publishers again?
Murder by Design, the UNSANE cinema of Dario Argento, is coming out through Midnight Marquee. The plan is to do a color version in hardback, as well as a black and white softcover version. So that'll be kinder on your pocketbook. And Assault on the System, the nonconformist cinema of John Carpenter, is coming out through WK Books. And I don't know if they're doing 2 versions or not. If it's just going to be a color version, or if there's going to be a color and a black and white, I'm not really sure.
Now, is there a preferred way for people to purchase your books? Does it matter to you, or is Amazon?
Amazon's as good as anything, honestly. Midnight Marquee used to have a website that they would sell books to people, but they don't do it anymore. So, yeah, Amazon is about as good as anything.
Okay, great. Well, Troy, thank you so much for coming on. Your wealth of knowledge is really appreciated, and again, we both really enjoy the commentary as well. So, we look forward to reading more of your books and seeing more of your commentary.
Well, thank you. I hope you continue to enjoy them, and that I don't bore anybody too much whenever I talk.
Well, folks, thanks for listening to us again. You can come over to our Facebook group. That's the Sadistic Cinema Community. We also have a fan page on Facebook. That's just Sadistic Cinema. We are also on Twitter, sadistic_cinema. We do have a website, sadisticcinema.com. And I'm not missing anything, am I, Steven?
Well, if anybody wants to contact us if you're a filmmaker and you want to come on, or an idea for guests, please email us at sadisticcinema@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, Steven, it's always great doing this with you, my friend. Anything else that we need to add before we go?
No, I don't think so. I just really enjoyed the conversation with you, Troy. Thank you for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, folks, this has been another episode of Sadistic Cinema, and we will have more coming out to you. Thanks a lot. Have a great night.